Okay, so Aryan, maybe a problem with the camera. We'll try and get that fixed as we go along. Magnus looking confused there, but as Simon mentioned, it's a bit of a surprise. It's the French defence, and we've only seen the French defence played a handful of times so far on the tour this season. It's very rare at the top level, actually. More popular at club level, tournament level, maybe. But, yeah, Magnus, he wheels out this opening once in a blue moon, so a bit of a surprise. And Aryan reacting by bringing the white knight out, protecting the centre, and Black's bishop coming out means we're going to get a really feisty game in this one. Simon, you're a bit of an expert yourself on the French defence.
Yeah, I'd certainly. I mean, this position I've had hundreds of times before. It's also included in some courses that I've done. And the move that Magnus plays here actually was one of the first moves ever taught to me. This little move here, which might look a little bit strange, when I was about 7 years old. I remember my dad told me this move because the point is you're trying to swap off one of White's best pieces, which is that bishop next to the king. Can be a very dangerous piece. But in general, the French defence, I think, is a very exciting opening, actually. And you can, if you go back historically, it was like the games between Mikhail Tal and Botvinnik in the World Championships, and their games were so fascinating in the French defence. And it's around then when the opening got quite popular. I know that Nepo has been using the French defence as well as recently with the black pieces. So it's pretty, it's a good opening, definitely. Yeah.
A very good opening. I think one of the players, a couple of the players maybe in this event have done chessable courses on the French defence.
Definitely Anish Giri.
Anish Giri, and I think Pentala Harikrishna as well.
On French toast.
Yeah,
I think
beating the French defence.
So maybe these players will have studied their opponents or some of their rivals' chessable courses. Meanwhile, a few strange moves have been happening. We saw Black's bishop, when it was attacked, go the whole way back. Magnus is trying some really creative stuff, but definitely don't try this at home.
I was looking at this, David, just a month ago when I was playing the Reykjavik Open.
Okay.
I was preparing this actual position against Max from a very strong player from Holland. And I looked at this position because I thought, I don't want my opponent to attack me because he knows so much theory. Can I get a position where I can play easily? And I looked at this and I thought, I'm not sure I like it that much for Black. So I actually gave up. And the assessment of this position is supposed to be it's a little bit better for White. But maybe this doesn't bother Magnus. He just wants something solid to play.
Yeah, and he is solid for now, Black. Because the centre's closed, it doesn't matter that all of Black's pieces are still asleep on their original squares. So, I mean, I would never, ever do this. Personally, I would never undevelop a piece like Magnus has done. He bringing his black squared bishop back. Maybe we can show this on the board because it is really committal. But yeah, as Simon says, Black is solid enough for now, and it will get Aryan thinking for himself. And it was this move that I found so shocking. Black's bishop has just come to this square 2 moves ago, and now after it got kicked away by this pawn, it stepped the whole way back to its starting square. The whole reason is that you don't want to block in this knight. This knight wants to develop, but undeveloping your pieces like this is not to be recommended in general, unless you're the world champion, of course. And, OK, White gave a check, hitting the black king. This was blocked. White stepped back. And after the white knight also stepped back here in this position, it's all a battle about whether Black can get his pieces out. Are there enough squares? Black is super cramped. How are these pieces ever going to enter the game?
I mean, I would have thought here that Black really needs to be able to play bishop to basically try to attack White's bishop, because if White gets one more move in, if White's able to move a pawn to where the white knight came from, it just looks really nice for White. He's managed to ensure his centre. So
yeah, this is a nice pawn chain for White. You've locked everything down, and so you think this move, Simon, trading the bishop?
Yeah, I think this is a line. This is a main line. Yeah, and I think I was even looking at this kind of stuff before. You've got to try to get rid of this bishop because it might look good, but it's not very good, Black's bishop. Yeah,
if the bishops do come off, then at least now the more trades that have happened, the more Black frees up his position, and suddenly the black knight has a good square at least. These double pawns aren't such a big weakness. You can push one of them forward later to trade off. Yeah, looks like a good move. Magnus thinking, but we're expecting this bishop move. Jovanka, is this a popular line? You say it's been played before, this bishop move?
It's been played on, I would say, about 30 games. So it's reasonable. But I do think that Simon's move that he suggested, which is the main move, it might not be knowledge for a person that doesn't regularly play the French defence. And, we've just seen that Magnus is kind of like a hobby French player. He plays it once in a while.
Why is that?
I'm just saying...
if he ever hears he's a hobby player.
No, as a hobby
that's-
French player. I mean, because you have certain openings that, you know, they're not your bread and butter. So you don't quite know the subtleties, so to speak. So, like, for instance, I didn't even think about this bishop trade that Simon thought about. And he knew instinctively, OK, you've got to stop that bishop from getting to a beautiful diagonal. You've got to stop white from reinforcing the pawn trade. I was thinking, you know, that bishop looks great on that diagonal. Just keep it there. So that's the reason why I kind of refer to Magnus being a hobby
player.
No, I didn't say hobby player.
Just a hobby player.
I said hobby French player.
So this is like a paper, they twist the words, don't they? You just take it out of context and your banker called Magnus a hobby player. You know, headlines everywhere.
Look at this. Magnus is looking, well, to his left a moment ago, and that normally means that he's trying to remember something, but it looks like he was trying to remember something. He couldn't quite recall what the main move was. For example, Simon's bishop move. And, OK, when in doubt, push the h-pawn.
Oh, but look at the bar with that move.
Yeah, and this just... I think computers won't like this because now black can never really castle on that side of the board. The black king, if it ever tries to castle onto the king side, the right side of the board, then that black pawn has actually pushed too far forward. It's a weakness that white can attack later. But Magnus is trying to take control over the dark squares, so over as much territory as possible. So, OK, it makes some sense pushing forward, but the black king is probably doomed to stay in the centre for a long time. Risky stuff.
Risky stuff. And it turns out, Simon, you have 27 published Chessable courses, according to Buddy.
27?
Yeah, that's a lot.
Really? That many? Can't be that many. I mean, they didn't...
Quick search shows
lot of
that
hours of
Ginger
your
DM
life.
has
I know.
published 27 Chessable
I mean,
courses.
I know they locked me in a basement and said, you've got to work for the next 2 months before we feed you. But I didn't realise it went on that long. I'm joking. I wanted to do them. But it can't be 27. 27 published courses. No.
Because how many hours of video does many of those courses have?
They're all about at least 10 hours. Some of them are
cow.
30 hours. So it's a lot. That's a lot of video. I mean, 27, maybe 27 videos, including other companies I work for, but it can't be 27 Chessable. I don't believe it.
I believe
You've done
it.
quite a lot, though.
I've done a lot.
You've
Yeah,
done-
I've done a lot. But 27, where's my life gone? So,
We need more of our viewers to verify that fact. So
Yes.
check out
Yeah.
Chessable. Simon Williams, Ginger GM.
No, I do love making the courses, obviously, and it's a pleasure to do so. But 27 is a lot, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a lot of courses.
It's my age, I wish.
Yeah, and mine. Yeah.
It's like that moment when you count up all the shoes you've got in your closet and you're like, oh, that many.
I did that the other day, actually. It was a catastrophe.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, we have another move by Harry.
Yeah, talking of catastrophe, this could be bad for black if he's not careful. But Magnus, he needs to get his pieces out. So Aryan there with white just blocking black's h-pawn. So we've got kind of a locked up situation there on the right half of the board. But Magnus taking the time to eventually develop the black knight. But if you look at black's dark squared bishop in front of the black king, that piece has moved 3 times out of black's first 10 moves. And it's not on that great a square anyway. So black's lost a lot of time. White needs to do something quick in order to kind of profit from that. So I still like white's position, but there is a big question what to do next. Often computers misevaluate positions from a human point of view because they think, OK, you have a space advantage, which white does here in the centre. You have more active pieces, better developed pieces, which white kind of does, but still no plan forward for a human player.
I assumed White's idea was to, play this move he's playing and just bring the bishop back to that square, and then maybe exchange the bishop for black's knight and have, well, maybe quite a nice strategic position with some bishop g5s and e6 breaks. So it's just this seems like a very natural plan, and I think you're right. The computer is definitely over-evaluating White's position because it's a blocked structure, and computers don't evaluate blocked structures as well as they should do.
This is the type of position where if one computer played another computer, white would win, but it would take 100-something moves anyway. So from a human point of view, that's less likely to happen.
And we should, of course, say a few words about Aryan Tari, the second highest rated player in Norway after Magnus Carlsen. Of course, he's been a second for Anish Giri, at least I know, so he must be quite good with the openings.
He's very good with the openings. I remember back in, 2017 now, he knocked me out of the World Cup because he was so well prepared in the openings. I would often struggle to get any advantage when I had white, and when I was black, I was always on the back foot from an early stage. So, yeah, I mean, he's very, very strong. He's broken through slightly lately.
Yeah.
He's pushing slowly towards that 2,700 mark, which kind of signifies the real kind of creme de la creme. But, yeah, I think it's been a great thing for him having Magnus kind of as that role model for him to aspire to. But at the same time, it must be hard always being the number 2, right?
Do you think,
always being compared to the world champion.
Do you think Magnus is a good role model for Aryan?
Yeah, I mean, chess-wise at least, definitely. Why not? I mean, imagine having the world champion hanging out, playing practice games.
Definitely.
They're very close. They've played on the same international team for years.
And I was just thinking, just that ability to play blitz against the world champion, and just think about it. You managed to test your wits for hundreds of games, and if you manage to score something, great. If you don't, it's a learning experience. And
only 22 years old, Aryan
Exactly.
Tari. He is a lot younger than Magnus Carlsen, almost 10 years younger.
Yeah, former world junior champion, I think. So, still a lot of room for him to improve.
And it's looking good, I guess, in this first game against his fellow Norwegian.
He's very good in the opening, Sky. And I mean, you don't become a second for someone like Anish Giri without knowing your stuff. So Aryan, I think that's why maybe Magnus went for something a bit offbeat, a bit rare, unusual. He's just trying to survive the opening and take the game into kind of muddier waters. But this last move by Black, yes, it's locking down the light squares, but look at all of Black's pawns. They're mostly on light squares. That means you don't control the dark squares. And some of Simon's ideas might come into play a bit later. Maybe we can jump in, show what Aryan is thinking about right now. Yeah. And it's all to do with maybe the dark squares, this one, maybe this one later on. You could start by thinking about trading bishops. This definitely looks like Black's best piece, and it's moved about a lot, so you might as well say to your opponent, OK, you've moved about, but you've just wasted time. I'm going to trade you off. I don't really see what Black does next move, to be honest. I guess you bring the knight in, but as Simon also mentioned, at some point now, White can drop the bishop back and trade off this strong knight. And that pawn structure is going to favour White.
It does feel like that Magnus is probably in wait-and-see mode. He has to just react, and we see the bishop move on the board. Just make a few no moves, just...
Yeah, I mean, I think you're just a little bit worse, aren't you, with Black here, because it's White who's pushing with his ideas, and it's very hard to come up with an active plan for Black. I mean, look at what Black can do. I mean, Black, I was thinking this move might well be worth doing because the knights could become extremely good the more closed the position is. So I think this makes sense, at least getting rid of one of White's knights and swapping that off. But Black would love to do a pawn break here, and the normal pawn break you'd try to play in the French defence is this move here with the pawn to try to put some pressure on White's centre. Without this pawn break, it's very hard for Black to get any counterplay. As you say, Ivanka, he just has to kind of wait and see what Tari's going to come up with there. So a little bit better, definitely, for White.
Yeah, and unfortunately for Black, this desirable move you mentioned, it's not possible because of this pin. So just by logic there, maybe Black can get his king out the way, maybe plant it on this square, which is relatively safe. You're not castling, but you're kind of guiding your king towards safety. And then next move, potentially, you can start pushing forward and putting some pressure on White's stronghold in the centre. But it's very slow for Black. Also, White is spoilt for choice. Which way do we think White's going to castle? There are arguments for both sides of the board.
Also, White has the luxury of maybe even taking as much space as possible on the wings. And I'm just kind of using pattern recognition. OK, and we see Magnus kind of abandon this idea of pushing the c-pawn forward. And instead, I think he's just trying to lock down the position.
Do you think, Ivanka, after White's bishop moves away from the attack, is he going to play this? And look at what Black's pawn structure now, all on the light squares. I mean, this is so weird. Yeah.
Looks like a mountain chain, like the Alps.
I think, you know what, I think he's going to do that.
He's going to do something similar.
He's going to do something similar like that. But then again, it's White who has the luxury of opening up the position. They have the pawn breaks. And like you've kind of said, the White king has the flexibility to go to the right, to go to the left, he can go either side. And once again, Magnus has to wait in a constructive way, which is not easy, actually.
Yeah, that being said, I mean, it seems that we generally like White's position here in the studio, but it's still hard for White to find the breakthrough. Black is rock solid because of this pawn chain. This is quite good strategy in general. Once you've kind of traded off your light squared bishop, put your pawns on light squares so you can control the light squares. And OK, here we go. Aryan, because he's got the bishop pair now, because he's got a bit more space, he's trying to accelerate the play. And
there we go.
We do get that pawn structure. All the Black pawns on light squares.
Yeah, definitely. It's strange. You hardly ever see that in a match between two strong players at this level. So
Is it good? Is it bad?
I mean, generally you have to be very careful because, as David said, if you put all your pawns on light squares, as you do here, the opposite colour become very weak because you can't guard any of the dark squares with your pawns. So you can see all the light squares where black's pawns are, they're only attacking light squares. So the dark squares, therefore, are holes. Very hard for white to get in them, but yeah, maybe it's...
But so that white dark squared bishop, is that now a very strong piece for Aryan?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, we could imagine a situation where actually the dark squared bishops come off because white's dark square bishop potentially strong, but black's dark squared bishop is the only guardian of the dark squares. So it does make some sense to maybe trade off those dark squared bishops, and then later white's knight will try to creep into the dark squares. Black's knights, their main job will be stopping white's knight getting in. I think the main problem for Aryan potentially is that white's light squared bishop is just kind of hitting against concrete. That's why black's pawns, they've kind of created this strong, rock-solid formation. White's bishop, the light squared bishop, may be lacking a future. But if things do open up, it's going to favour Aryan. If he can creep into the dark squares, it's going to favour Aryan. I think Magnus just has to hope that he can trade off as many pieces as possible. For example, I think it would be a small mistake here for the pawns on... OK, he castles his king, very logical. I was going to say, to release the tension and trade off a set of pawns on the A file, that would be a mistake, because you don't want to open up lines, trade off rooks, trade off everything, because if you trade things off, you have nothing left for white. You have no advantage. Black has got no weaknesses, and I think you have to keep the tension. And Magnus, look at this, he's throwing his knight to the side of the board. He's trying to force Aryan to block things up even more. If you block things up, that will favour black's knights. So, key decision now for Aryan.
That's certainly a key decision. You know, are you kind of go into the temptation of just blocking up the position by saying, hey, I got all the space? Or are you just going to make another improving move and maybe try to control the knight's circuit? And very tense positions so far. And whilst the players are pausing for thought, I did want to share with you, we have a quiz of the day where we're asking what is the thing you struggle with the most in the openings. And George Charman says, I love nothing more than sacking pawns in the opening. It's a very far cry from this position. For a promising attack, only to realise 3 moves later, I'm dead lost. Perhaps I need some Ginger GM magic.
Yes.
What would be a good chessable course for him then, Simon?
The Tau course. There's a course by Mikhail Tau, or The Art of Attack, which is another course about how to attack and how to sacrifice. So either of those ones are all about attacking in chess. So The Art of Attack, very famous book that did the videos for, or the Tau course, which is just about this crazy attacker. So they will help you, well, maybe a little bit, you know, sack those pawns, but maybe not in a losing way. So,
yeah, if your instinct is to sacrifice, don't kill that instinct. Just
go
embrace
with
it, right?
Go with it. Yeah, I mean, you should do. I mean, like, I think in chess you should always play the way you want to play because it's more fun. But I have to say, I really don't like what Aryan's done here. He's basically, I think, gone for the draw here. Maybe I'm being a little bit critical, but why close down the queen side? You didn't need to do that. I mean, in order, you know, it just doesn't look like the right strategy from white there, personally.
Yeah, we've seen one side of the board completely locked down now. Nothing really is ever going to happen on the left half of the board. So players switched completely over to the right half. And Magnus, he's dancing with his knights. He would love to trade off one set of knights now. If white's knight disappears, white has no chance of winning this game. So Magnus, he wants to bring this black knight that's just moved to the top of the board over again to challenge white's knight. And if those knights disappear.
Maybe we can show that, David, where white decided to block down. OK, they're going to have a bit of manoeuvring here so we can come back to the position, but nothing's going to happen immediately.
So just a few moves ago.
Yeah, there was just this moment where Aryan decided to play his pawn forwards here. And you can see after this move, there's nothing that can be done on the queen side. There's no pawn break. So as we see, everything's locked up, as Dave mentioned. But if we go back, Aryan could have even just taken the pawn. Let's say he takes the pawn. This keeps the position more open. It gives more winning chances to both sides. But if you want to win, you've got to keep some open lines. You can't block the whole position down. So maybe this is a tactile draw offer, I would have thought. But I don't know. Seems a bit strange.
Yeah, and there was no rush either. I mean, for example, at the minimum, you could lift your rook up the board, swing the other rook across, try to open up this line. Yeah, just keep the tension. Don't commit when you have so many options. And if we fast forward to the current position, Ivanka, what do you think? Any chance now for White to break through? I mean, it looks very unlikely to me.
It does look very unlikely, and the only thing that I can see is that, you know, it's a closed position, so therefore everything will hinge on a pawn break on this opening. And the only opening there is actually to pick up a pawn on the right side, and unfortunately, the white king is there. So I envisage that if Aryan is feeling in an aggressive mood, his king is going to take on a Herculean journey over to the blocked up side of the board, and then initiate something on the right side.
Yeah, for example, if you could pick up the white king and plant it on this side of the board where it's completely blocked, completely safe, then you can start launching pawns forward, as Ivanka mentions. For example, this one, even if it comes at the cost of a pawn later, just to explode open the position, to open up lines. But the problem is, firstly, this journey with the white king takes a long time. And secondly, even if you achieve that, Black's king is going to be equally safe on this side of the board, and opening things up here still looks like a distant dream. Black has kind of locked down the only possible pawn break to open up lines.
It does seem, though, that White has all the winning chances, even in what probably is a very locked position, because, again, with a position so locked, as you mentioned, Ivanka, you have to look at pawn breaks, and Black hasn't really got any pawns that he can move that ever. His only one is moving this pawn next to the queen, but that will just make his position worse. So White does have a pawn break to attack the knight. Even if it takes ages to arrange, he's still got potential. And often it's who's got the potential in the position. White's got potential in his position, Black doesn't have potential. And that means White's got better chances here.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, Simon, there, just to show on the board, if Black ever pushes this pawn, for example, if White waits, if you ever push this pawn, you only help open up towards your weaknesses. Black just has to sit and hope. But Magnus is quite good at sitting, and he's very good at kind of doing nothing, just kind of slow manoeuvring moves, getting ready for the action to really happen. And yeah, the status quo, it was going to be maintained for a long, long time, I feel.
It seems it's a calm, maybe a little nervous start to Chessable Masters. The bars in most of the games, as we see on the bottom of the screen, is roughly to the middle. I do see that Mamadjarov, the bar, is liking it for him against Erik Hansen. Other than that, maybe for Ding against Jordan van Vries, the bar is slightly over to Ding's side. But so far, a calm start to the Chessable Masters. So when will it explode? I do suspect it will explode at some time.
We know it will. The tour this season has been crazy. So many decisive games, barely any draws, no quick draws at least. And yeah, the players, when they find their stride, that's when we'll see the action.
Yeah, and no one wants to get that bad start. So I guess, do you think when we look at stats, we're going to see some different openings, maybe more solid, non-losing kind of openings in the first few games?
Well, you know, traditionally, that is the thing you would see. But in these tournaments so far, no. The players have been playing with wild abandon, and they've just been playing fighting chess.
From the very start.
From the very, very start. And, you know, Magnus is actually renowned for being a slow starter.
That's true, yeah.
You know, maybe even losing the first game and then just getting off quietly and then kicking into gear. Yeah. So, yeah. But, I mean, I don't expect that at all. I think maybe this one, if it's a draw, you know, and I would fully expect it to be a draw, I suspect the other games, there's probably fireworks on the board.
Yeah, there's at least 2 or 3 of those other games which I think are going to produce decisive results, produce some winners. And, OK, a trade, a bishop for knight.
Do you know what, David? I was thinking about this and I thought if White really wants to draw, he could bring his knight back to g5 and go f4, and there's nothing there at all. I can see. But he hasn't gone for that. OK, he's still playing for a win then,
Things
I
are
guess.
livening up slightly. So there is a semi-open file now towards the white king. And actually there was a big trick, a big trap. If Aryan had been greedy and grabbed this isolated pawn, it looks like White has won a pawn, then suddenly queen takes pawn would win for Black, because this pin means the queen is untouchable, and suddenly the white king too open. So Aryan had to dodge that. He had to get his king out the way, and the Black knight retreating, now defending this pawn. And Aryan just pushing this pawn forward. Simon, you mentioned the complete draw, and I think we're going to see that any moment. If these knights disappear, there's no chance for the major pieces. Yeah, I mean, for example, you could just trade here and then just lock things up, bring your queen to this square, bring your rook across to defend this pawn. Yeah. No weaknesses for either side.
This is the thing. If White had an open line on the queen side, which she could have had, White could still try to win this position, because The old saying is you've got to play against two weaknesses. Black's kind of got a weakness with the Harry pawn, I would say. But you need another weakness to win this game.
Let's go back to the players. We're going to see a draw any moment. Look at this pawn structure as well.
So strange.
This is the most locked pawn structure you will ever see.
Yeah.
Simply nothing to do. Neither side can push forward without losing a pawn. And look how kind of irrelevant the rooks are here. No open lines for them, and we're going to see the kings do a bit of dancing.
That's it. And Aryan's king has wandered all the way.
Is it going to come back again?
Are they going to repeat moves, actually, by just moving the kings backwards and forwards?
Magnus is repeating, no doubt about that. And we have a draw between the two Norwegians in a very strange pawn situation on this board. I want to take a picture of that.